Alright, I think we are ready here. I want to say we're ready. Let's see if we actually are ready. Yeah, everything seems to be working here. Do we have this working here with the word? Yes, it does in fact work. That's good. How's everything on the screen looking? Oh, whoops. Like, it looks like everything should be filling the screen proper. Let me just make sure. Oh, that's information. Howdy, Xavier. Good to see you. I am. Pretty sure I have this right. Blood. Sure. Subtitles off. Yeah, that's fine. Nope. Looks fine. Yeah, once we get in, I just want to make sure like we're not like having black bars on the side of the screen for the stream or something.
You've seen it.
I don't care about you. Yep, looks good. Everything looks like it's fitting. Alright, well, it's that time. Well, first, we're gonna turn down the volume on this side. Wait, how do I do that? How do I do that again? Oh, no. There we go. Can't believe they don't let you do this from the menu. And no master volume either? What is the world coming to, chat? Huh? Huh? That has to be like an offline thing, right? Because I'm pretty sure we're not in. Pretty sure we're not in game. I mean, sorry, online, I should say. It looks like we are, though. I don't know. I feel like I'd see more blood stains if that was true. Let's just confirm real quick before we go. Another playthrough, let's go. Yeah, new PC means everything on the old PC doesn't get carried over from Steam. That's how it be. It really do be like that. Alright. Look, he calls this the best Dark Souls. Slander! Lies! Anyway, we're gonna be reviewing the Alkin and Ven stuff since that's come out. Also, damn, that animation on her cloak.
Oh my.
We got shots of this before, I don't care. What do we call this asshole? Why you play this? No. There we go. Why you play this? There. It speaks to me. Hey, no, Bray, look. Wait, no, Bray, you were the one who said that! Even worse slander! I can accept this type of bullshit from I am. But you? Et tu, no, Bray? Et tu?
At least.
There we go. Ah, we don't care. We don't care. Alright, we go back to Sorcerer. Life Ring doesn't really add anything, right? But yeah, not like I'm getting... Yeah, healing wares. Healing's actually worthwhile. Alright. Call him Caleb.
I'm here for the same reason.
Yeah. Don't care about the rest of you. Oh, wow, they're teaching us how to pick up stuff, chat. Whatever will we do? Alright. Alright, so... I think everything's functional on your side, so I think it's safe for us to put on the Alkin and Ven stuff to review now. Oh boy, I'm sorry I didn't do a stream, by the way. I was just in the zone with that doc. Oh yeah, this is definitely a problem. We have to fix this. We have to fix this immediately. I was hoping I was just like, I was misremembering. I was like, oh no. I could have swore... I could... Let me see. Properties. Updates. Files. Betas. There's a way to make it where I can start up DS2 without... Let me look this up real quick. How to start up DS2 offline. In offline mode before launching the game or disable internet. Okay, so playing Steam offline mode. So let's see. I could have swore I did this, but just to be safe. Steam. Hello? Hello? Alkin, my beloved. Anyway. Oh, hey, Nicolino. Good to see you in the chat, too. Ay, ay, ay. Ay, ay, ay. It's always the technical difficulties when there's a new thing going on. Even when that new thing is technically the old thing. Alright, I'm quitting out of the game first. Let's just do that. Hello? Can you please show me the Steam drop-down menu? Why are you a black screen? Why? I do not get this. 1 second. We're gonna exit that real quick. Let's just exit Steam entirely. Then we go back in. Alright, who cares about all that? There we go. Go offline. There we go. We're in offline mode now. Everything's right in the world. Alright, now everything can function properly. Let's get this thing set up then while I do this. Alrighty, so we have this dock here, which means if we do this... There we go. That works. I feel like I could probably get away with expanding this, if I'm being real. Actually, no, you know what I can do? I could just do this. There we go. There we go. Alright, so people want to just kind of keep track of, like, what text is stuff on the screen. Here you go. Maybe about this size, right? It's not going to take up that much, though, because we're not going to have any of those little margin notes or anything to look over. Okay. Alright, so something like this. That seems fair. That seems fair. Yay! We're offline! Alright, so... everything should be solid now. There should be no issue. Oh, there should be no issues. Come on. There we go. There we go. Controller just had to cooperate with me for a second. God. Just started playing and already feeling the pain. Alright. So, let's get this started. Now again, this is a 25-pager. it went up like 3 pages in total with all the added stuff, so be forewarned, we're going to be listening to this girl talk to us for a while.
Alkin and Ven always despise one another. The Ring of Blades makes a point of the two countries' deeply hostile relationship in its description, each apparently becoming belligerent regularly if its inspiration from an Alkin knight and boost to attack power are any indication. Both Alkin and Vane were also kingdoms with their own royalties. So
there we go.
this antagonism was as much a personal vendetta between families. Nothing keeps a cycle of war going like a blood feud at the highest level. This further implies that...
Also, again, just for anyone who's wondering, the highlights are supposed to be for me to kind of keep track of changes and stuff. I got lazy sometimes, and I would just change entire paragraphs, whether or not those entire paragraphs were actually new or completely changed or not. Like, sometimes I just, when you get busy, you're like, oh, right, I forgot to mark that one. I was like, I'm not going to look through it. I'm in the zone! Anyway, going back.
This further implies that the two nations existed close enough to come to blows, which begs the question, where can we find their territories? The kingdoms collapsed well before the events of our journey through Drangleic, but we can still locate their capitals thanks to the bell towers established during their heyday. Belfry Luna stands at the Lost Bastille, Belfry Sol at the Iron Keep. Luna houses the Bell of Alkin, belonging to the Princess of Ven, who crafted puppets to guard it. The same holds true for Sol, the Bell of Ven, and the Prince of Alkin. The talkative puppet guards further reveal that the Princess Bell is in Alkin and the Princess Bell is in Ven. Some fans have thus interpreted the Bell of Alkin as existing in Alkin, while the Bell of Ven exists in Ven. However, this requires that the princess and prince send their bells to each other with their puppets. Two hostile countries might exchange bells for diplomatic reasons, but allow small armies into their territory? Unlikely. In other words, the bells of Ven and Alkin are more liable to be named for where they are from, not where they are at. The prince and princess did gift bells they made to each other, whereafter their new owners employed guards from within their own countries to protect those bells on the gifter's behalf. This would make the Lost Bastille part of Ven and the Iron Keep part of Alkin. Which aside, dialogue and item descriptions do establish both areas as people's castles in the past, so it would be appropriate if they had been used as the residences to these two countries' royalty. Those places for the seats of government fit on the wider stage as well, with the official map of Drangleic showing the Iron Keep and Lost Bastille relatively close along that western end of the continent. With Alkin situated in the south and Ven based in the north, they almost certainly bordered each other. It is no wonder then that they share a long and spiteful history together, constantly disputing where to draw the line between them, as is so often the case with medieval kingdoms. Being overland neighbors probably plays into their origins as well, given that they are actually one and the same. The kingdoms share a founder per the Ring of Blades description. Although not necessarily a man as the localization claims, it is impressive for someone to be the founder of even a single nation, let alone two. Did this person really establish them separately right next door? Or perhaps the country's two histories once one? Put another way, Alkin and Ven may have been founded as one country that split into two competing states later down the line as a result of some civil conflict. This way, they could both claim lineage to the same founder despite having become different entities. That scenario would also clarify the bitter hatred. A divide in society, culture, and politics across a wide geography can easily escalate into civil war that ended in stalemate, forcing both sides to develop into independent states whilst they continued vying for supremacy. Further evidence to this notion is the fact that both the prince and princess create identical puppets, insinuating that both Alkin and Ven shared knowledge of this specific art. If the two kingdoms had originally been one, then this comes as no surprise. Questions about the founder and the resulting split abound. We can at least determine that these nations weren't around until after the collapse of Olithus. Belfry Sol's bellkeepers carry the instructions for Flame Swathe, one of Strade's inventions, while Belfry Luna was added onto the existing architecture from the Olithus castle. The original one country accordingly seems to have salvaged some of the old Magic Kingdom's legacy prior to the split. Of course, knowing its place in the timeline doesn't narrow down the founder's true identity much. That said, the individual is possibly connected to Hovel. Past Belfry Luna, in an obscure corners lies a corpse with a dragon tooth, the great hammer wielded by Hovel and his warrior followers who imitated the revered knight of Gwyn's equipment in the original Dark Souls. DS1, while it does boost resistance to fire and magic, it is still odd to find in a castle-turned prison when other Hovel equipment is acquired elsewhere. Might this have some link to Ven? According to the armor set's description, conflicting accounts claim Hovel to be the name of warriors that wore the armor as well as a country destroyed by war. DS1 affirms the former, but this doesn't mean the latter is fiction per SE. In the Cave of the Dead, we encounter an ancient warrior armed and armored like Hovel. This hollow is dubbed Varg, originally Warg, in obvious reference to war, and he may well be a soldier of this hypothetical Hovel nation. Combined with the armor and shield obtained in the gutter, and there is no doubt that warriors of Hovel, or like-minded imitators, have resided underground in Drangleic. Maybe these soldiers were simply hoping to learn more about becoming rock-like by immersing themselves in actual rock, or maybe they had sought out Sin to relive the rock's dragon hunt. Whatever their motive, their presence says it all. If there is a nation named after Hovel, it should be in this land. And yet, we never come across ruins overtly linked to the supposed country. But if the country was destroyed by war from within and split apart, there wouldn't be any. Therefore, it is possible that Hovel, one of his warriors, or a similar imitator founded a country in the god's name sometime after the destruction of Olithus. The founder would need to have an exceptionally high opinion of Hovel to name an entire country after him, and outfitting its soldiers with Hovel's equipment would explain the confusion in the modern record. Stories exist of a country called Hovel, but tales of warriors of Hovel go back even farther than them, leading to doubt over which is the accurate account. In reality, both existed concurrently and took after the examples of the original Hovel and his warriors from DS1. If so, how did a nation founded upon something as solid as rock crumble apart? The Dragon Tooth's description alone notes the equipment's resilience, fire, and magic. Perchance that reliable protection made Hovel complacent to such threats over time in unexpected ways. Aspects of Alkin and Ven bleed through in the characters of the prince and princess and the bell towers they built. The Sun Bell Tower in The Dragontooth's description alone notes the equipment's resilience to fire and magic. Perchance that reliable protection made Hovel complacent to such threats over time in unexpected ways. Aspects of Alkin and Ven bleed through in the characters of the prince and princess and the bell towers they built. The Sun Bell Tower in Alkin reflects a land bathed in the warm colors of glowing red lava. Meanwhile, the Moon Bell Tower in Ven captures a land basked in the cool blue hues of the night sky and surrounding ocean. Besides reinforcing the thematic designs of each area, these belfries remind us of how the sun is associated with fire and the moon with sorcery. This is pertinent since areas within Alkin's territory usually provide pyromancies, while areas within Ven's territory typically keep things related to sorcerers, mostly works originating from Olithus. Looking at just Belfry Luna, we can loot the Southern Ritual Band and an Acanded Falchion. This color and magic dichotomy is further emphasized by the incense prevalent in these areas. Although the Simpletons and Skeptic spices aren't specific to these two countries, one or the other is overwhelmingly found in Alkin or Ven, Alkin hoarding the spice for fools, and Ven enjoying the lion's share of spice for non-believers. Perhaps each is endemic to its respective region, but it is definitely fitting that the former is red while the latter is blue. The spices are a substance that makes it easier to perform certain kinds of magic through The spices are a substance that makes it easier to perform certain kinds of magic through inhaling the peculiar aroma they give off. The Skeptic spice lowering a spell's faith requirement, while the Simpleton spice lowers a spell's intelligence requirement. These seemingly magical aromas don't actually improve one's conviction or reason, just substitute for one's deficiencies with their particular magic power so that it is easier to perform a given spell. This would imply that Alkin was deficient in reasoning, whereas Ven was deficient in faith. This does make sense so far as Ven's association with sorcery, but Skeptic spice is used for merely hexes and miracles, not pyromancies. Granted, this could be purely for reasons of game mechanics, as faith does factor into a pyromancy's damage, and later serves as a requirement for casting pyromancies in DS3. That idea finds further support in the Simpleton's Ring, which uses some of said incense as its centerpiece and causes the wearer to turn invisible while rolling. Based on the effect, the Fool's incense possesses power related to holy light magic, which can manipulate time and space to cause near invisibility. Whatever the details, the smell of incense surely isn't strengthening the wearer's faith or miracles. And in that case, these magic substances likely have wider applications than what is reflected in game. Moreover, Alkin does appear to have been a country of faith as much as claimed. Behind a false wall in Iron Keep, we can rob chests of the Protective Chime, Grand Spirit Tree Shield, and Black Knight Greatsword. The Holy Bell commonly used in Lindeld is self-explanatory, as is the shield invoking the Holy Tree and God of Dreams Queller. Even the sword belonging to Gwyn's Knights, since their war against Chaos Demons demands faith of its wielder, which wasn't true of its DS1 iteration. This hidden storage isn't the last of it either. A monastery charm is looted from a nameless soldier in the same area. Then there are the separate chests and corpse holding onto a thunder quartz ring, plus a lightning short bow. Lightning being the element most associated with gods of Aenor Londo. Heading through the neighboring Earthen Peak leads us to a renowned knight carrying a divine blessing, a different corpse owning another along with a fire drake stone in the valley outside the tower.
Wait, let's hear that
while the collection of pyromancies, including Chaos Pyromancy.
Alright, let's say that one more time. So let's see. Moreover, Alkin disappeared to have been a country of faith as much as like. Okay, so that sounds right.
Behind a false wall in Iron Keep, we can rob chests of the Protective Chime, Grand Spirit Tree Shield, and Black Knight Greatsword. The Holy Bell commonly used in Lindeld is self-explanatory, as is the shield invoking the Holy Tree and God of Dreams Queller. Even the sword belonging to Gwyn's Knights, since their war against Chaos Demons demands faith of its wielder, which wasn't true of its DS1 iteration. This hidden storage isn't the last of it either. A monastery charm is looted from a nameless soldier in the same area. Then there are the separate chest and corpse holding onto a thunder quartz ring plus a lightning short bow, lightning being the element most associated with gods of Aenor Londo. Heading through the neighboring Earthen Peak leads us to a renowned knight carrying a divine blessing, a different corpse owning another along with a fire drake stone in the valley outside the tower. While the collection of pyromancies, including Chaos Pyromancies, can be divorced from religion, all the above items cannot. Alkin's religiosity is undeniable. There is thereby plenty of evidence to an ideological rift between the countries north and south, and it is see how the United Nation diverged. Seated at the heart of all of this, Ven's ancestors naturally held a profound interest in sorcery and the lost
Why are
technology
you
of
still
the
in the
Magic
staff?
Kingdom.
I switched to
By that
knife!
same token, Alkin's predecessors established themselves on the rivers of lava flowing out of a nearby volcano, demonstrating their deep fascination with fire. Fire is considered holy in the faiths descending from Loredran, making the settlers susceptible to the new religion arriving from overseas. Converted to the Archdrake sect, at least in part, the Southerners gave no attention to schools of magic based on reason, only the conjury rooted in primitive spirituality. Meanwhile, the Northerners continued to deepen their knowledge in the more sophisticated arts. They did retain common ground on universal techniques like golemcraft. But gradually, the two regions lost their shared identity until they formally split along those lines, becoming the oft-warring kingdoms with whom we are familiar. How ironic that Hovel's resilience in the face of fire and magic taught its people to embrace those powers wholeheartedly to the exclusion of rock. Its founder could never have imagined the people warring with themselves after discarding their roots, though, in fairness, soldiers gallivanting off on subterranean misadventures probably didn't help with retention. But for a country founded upon a warrior's memory, this outcome may be inevitable. Without any obvious external enemies, it isn't uncommon for citizens to turn their aggression internally. In the end, Hovel simply couldn't hold together long-term with such deep divides. Dark Souls often puts peoples of faith and reason at odds, the faithful in militant opposition to heresy. Alkin was doubtless no different in this regard, and its concerns about Ven's sorcery were well and truly justified. The puppets of Belfry Soul use fire weapons, as expected, but the dolls in Belfry Luna utilize dark weapons. In short, Ven didn't just learn sorcery, but dark magic. In all likelihood, this was thanks to the undead prisoners left over from Olifus. With so many of the curse trapped in one place, it is easier for residents to study the dark sign, and in doing so condition Ven to tolerate the abyss as just another intellectual curiosity. Had they been working to revive the dark sorcery of Manus? Either way, that practice would have been enough to incite the South against the North, and subsequently Alkin against Ven. Indeed, Alkin was the probable aggressor in most of these military conflicts. We can acquire its Zweihander as well as pieces of the Katarina set in its territory. These are weapons and armor associated with Knights of Katarina, who are characterized by their pious, straightforward nature and love for battle as alluded to in the set's description. Alkin may have thus been influenced by the old tales of these warriors. Such belligerence is decidedly expressed in the Ring of Blades. The Japanese description clarifies that the finger band is modeled on the weapon of specifically a Mad Knight of Alkin, who it also names. Adgars must have been unrestrained on the battlefield to earn a title synonymous with overwhelming aggression invoking a berserker. That rationalizes the ring's effect and depiction of multiple swords, embodying a never-ending flurry of attacks. And with that offensive power, Adgars gained renown, enough for several rings to be created in the knight's memory. One of those can be retrieved from a chest in Iron Keep, stored alongside the covetous silver serpent ring, a human effigy, and a fragrant branch of yore. The greedy snake band increases the souls acquired from slain enemies. The foe humanity brings to mind the dark, and the branch comes from a sweet-smelling tree that stirs up nostalgic memories powerful enough to even reverse petrification. Together, they suggest a certain longing in Alkin for that ferocity of Adgars against the country primarily dealing in soul sorcery and dark magic. Crushing Ven appears to have been the nation's pride. All that being the case, any civil war and subsequent conflict would likely be prompted by the South against a defending North, evidently more interested in intellectual pursuits than invasion. Even this aspect of the quarreling kingdoms seems to be embodied in the prince and princess behind the bell towers. Western cultures have historically associated the sun and moon with masculinity and femininity respectively, making it apt that the prince of more active Alkin built Soul, while the princess of more passive Ven built Luna. Whether or not this was true of the prince and princess themselves, this likely was the dynamic of their two kingdoms. But even if masculinity is normally imagined as passion and violence, and femininity is viewed as wisdom and harmony, neither Ven nor Alkin were willing to bury the hatchet. However it started, it was now guarised to have devolved into a continuous tit-for-tat. Yep. Even still, the prince and princess own dynamic convey an attempt to defy this bloody history. More than royals of enemy nations, they were star-crossed lovers. Love never meant to be.
Right?
The prince and princess had most likely first met on the battlefield. Both proved to own mighty souls, which is common among great warriors. And with the two countries constantly at war, they must have frequently led troops into battle, where they came face to face with the enemy commander. From there, they ultimately entered a clandestine relationship. To immortalize their bond, the royals each commissioned a bell to keep at the other's castle.
Alright, so originally, I just mentioned the Iron King side of this, but I felt like if I'm going to go with the presumption that the Prince of Alkin is the Iron King, I think it's only fair I do the same with the Princess of Ven and Lost Sinner. So I'm mentioning how, like, both of them end up proving to have powerful souls. So I think this is fair to them, and kind of establish that sort of dynamic of, okay, you know, two warring kingdoms, you know, prince and princess become king, queen of their respective countries. Makes sense that they, you know, they clash on the battlefield and meet. So I think this is just fair and sort of just like establishing, like, you know, just a basic logic there to how this all got started. Now, I do want to think about that because there's a few instances where something like this happens where, like, I have to allude to something before it's been established. I try to avoid that as much as possible, but it's just one of those things where it's like, because of just how Dark Souls 2 and, like, everything, like, you know, everything kind of overlaps with just how much crap there is, right? I think like it's okay to do it in this instance for something so simple, but I don't know. Maybe you guys think otherwise. Let's see. Clandestine relationship. Let's go.
To immortalize their bond, the royals each commissioned a bell to keep at the other's castle. Perhaps it was under the guise of a temporary truce,
Oh,
but the
thank
two
you,
managed to
Rucka.
exchange the gesture
Appreciate
without the
it.
opposing families
Always
discovering the
love
true
a good
meaning.
ruckus.
And once the bells were installed in their individual towers, the lovers were adamant to protect their sweetheart's gift from intruders. This prompted each to create puppets commanded to slay any who approach the bell and ring it, a job they have done and will continue to do so long as they are able. This is the basis for the Bellkeeper's covenant and demonstrates the depths of their love. Aside from an army of puppets, Belfry Luna is additionally home to gargoyles. According to their soul's Japanese description, these stone statues were specifically built at the bell tower and so don't predate it. Furthermore, the English text claim that they mysteriously came to life spontaneously is more accurately worded as one day came to possess life in the vaguest terms. In order to possess life, one must have a soul. In other words, these statues
Was
were
the
granted
lapis
souls
lazuli
much
to
like the
Haida?
puppets guarding the bell
Probably
towers.
not.
And with the timing of their
I have data
construction, it
analysis
is no
from
mystery
Who's It
as to
probably
why
came
the Princess of
afterwards.
Ben probably
So
wanted
it'd be
these
like
gargoyles to
Haida,
serve the same
Olafis,
roles as the
Ben.
puppets she created. The description for the gargoyle Vedant does imply them to be part of a long tradition of defending castles and forts with such elaborate statues, while predating the two warring kingdoms. Even the weapon is a reproduction of the spear mentioned in some ancient book the princess apparently referenced. However, that indicates that she wasn't the first to think of making these statues' guardianship more
I'm
than symbolic.
very happy about
The
this.
fact that both Alkin and Ven are able to install souls into artificial constructs to create living minions betrays how they inherited the art from Hovel. But where did that country inherit it? Olafis? But its origin would have to go back even farther if we are to believe the Biden's description. The art of crafting golems and gargoyles was first mastered by Einar Londo, with Heidi carrying on knowledge. Maybe it was Heidi who introduced the new world to the concept then? The Bastille gargoyles already use similar fire and lightning attacks, not to mention the same boss music as DS1's gargoyles. Moreover, New World
Could've
gargoyles
just
are
used
imagined
ladder.
as protecting castles and fortresses from curses specifically. This is an obvious reference to DS1, where they protected Sen's fortress and the castle of Einar Londo from the cursed undead attempting
swear,
to pass
the way
through.
she says
And when it
Einar
comes to the
Londo makes
reproduced
me
sphere,
uncomfortable.
close inspection reveals it features elements of those very gargoyles, including the head, shield, and tail axe. This weapon for gargoyles appears to be a corruption of the Einar Londo design. Altogether, it is clear that these elements of Einar Londo culture survived Hyde's destruction. Like with so many others, the received history had already become distorted, resulting in the new world mimicking merely the outward statues. What wasn't passed down as superficial accounts became twisted and fragmented almost beyond recognition. Still, the idea of living draconic statues survived the rise and fall of nations.
Leave it to
so some of
DS2
Hyde's
to
knowledge
fuck
of the
you
process
over.
may have collected dust in obscure corners of archives when not rediscovered by subsequent nations like Hovel. The same is undoubtedly
God,
true
this
of
game
Golem
is
Craft.
so
The
shit.
concept simply applied to smaller dolls in Alkin and Ben. The end result was Ben's princess ordering a multitude of statues for her to later bring to life like her puppets. While this edifies concerning the prince and princess puppetry, it doesn't explain the existence of the Bellkeeper's Covenant. Members are given a ring emblazoned with the seal of a bell, which allows them to be warped to one of the two bells as a gray spirit whenever someone approaches them. And after the trespasser is slain, the puppets ring the bell as they have done since their creation. Why recruit outsiders at all? The lovers plainly didn't want anyone approaching the bell towers, and yet the puppets' request for help from visitors and these rings function encourage just the opposite. Was this truly part of the puppets' original mandate or an independent decision they made long after the deaths of their creators? Should it be the latter, then what purpose did the rings serve originally? And why be so defensive about anyone entering and ringing the bell? Most likely, it was the
God,
lovers'
there's way
secret
too many
rendezvous
enemies
point.
here.
The royal sweethearts can't be hiding bell towers visible and audible to anyone at the castles, nor can they be protecting them from random destruction. That just leaves hiding something within them, which is supported by the bellkeepers providing hidden weapon as a covenant reward. However, what is there to hide beside the love the prince and princess secretly shared? And what evidence is there to find in an otherwise unassuming bell tower? None now, but at the time the puppets were created, it may have been the site of clandestine meetings. The seal is designed to summon the wearer to the location of the nearest bell tower that a human entered, perfect for the prince and princess to meet up in secret. At the same time, it would be disastrous if someone else saw the royal of
Yeah,
an
that's
enemy
true, I
nation
could
warp in
hold-
right
I
before
could
their eyes.
dual-wield them.
So guards were created to prevent trespassers. The
Let's see
bell's
if that
toll
works
is an all clear
better
signal
in
for the
terms
prince or
of
princess to put on the ring and visit the other.
playing.
This is why the covenant keeps trespassers from ringing it. It prevents false flags. Of course, there is no point to the Bellkeeper's
doesn't seem
mission
to
after
affect
all
the
this
set
time.
significantly.
Both Alkin and Ben have collapsed, and the prince and princess are unlikely to still be having any secret trysts. However, these puppets are essentially magic automatons and thus bound to follow their programming. As item descriptions poetically allude, the two's love for each other which motivated the puppets' creation binds them to protecting the symbol of their love for all eternity. These dolls are not operating on true logic so much as what is within the parameters set by their creators. If not commanded against recruiting outsiders, even as the number of broken puppets pile up, they will. And until commanded to do otherwise, they will continue to enact their original duty. In this way, the Prince of Alkin and the Princess of Ven's eternally unfulfilled love is also a curse. But curse or no, something did happen to the prince and princess and the kingdoms they represented, for the Japanese description of the Bellkeeper set doesn't refer to them as prince and princess, but king and queen. Evidently, the lovers had eventually become leaders of their respective nations, following their predecessors' deaths
God, I
conveniently
forgot.
around the
Forgot
same
what the
time.
stat-
This comes with the consequence of marrying different partners per their royal duties, though it is possible for the princess to have assumed the throne by herself if there were no other legal claimants.
Let's start with some
Matriarchy
vigor.
would also be consistent with a magic nation when women hold a special capacity for souls. However, this political reality didn't necessarily end the love affair or at least the mutual pining. The reality that the bell towers and their guards remain hints to neither having the resolve to give up so long, as they were both willing and able to do so. Keywords, willing and able. We cannot confirm that the King of Alkan and Queen of Ven are actually dead. The Japanese description broadly asserts that the king, queen, and both their kingdoms have been lost. Does that mean they are both dead, or just no longer king or queen of a country? Did they turn undead and hollow after their countries collapse? When and how did their countries fall apart? Forged by iron. The old Iron King was a weak king lacking in wealth and power until he plundered the iron located in Ven. This alone proves that this king, whose name has been lost to history, was a contemporary figure in the histories of Havel's feuding successor kingdoms. Moreover, Belfry's soul is located at his castle, meaning that the Iron Keep was likely built directly on top of Alkan's royal residence in its capital. This opens up the possibility that old Iron King was, in fact, a king of Alkan. Without a doubt, Queen Mytha's mannequins are created with the same art of puppetry used in Alkan and Ven,
because
and
we have the Iron Keep stuff later, so... Moreover, Belfry's soul is located at his castle, meaning that the Iron Keep is likely built directly on top of Alkan's royal yeah, that's, I think, fair. The thing is that the Iron Keep isn't really an Iron Keep, right? It's really, like, a stone keep with, like, iron adornments, you know? You got, like, a little, like, ironworks stuff that's on it, right? There isn't really that much, though, that you could say, oh, yeah, that's iron, right? So... yeah, I think built on top is fine, right? Because that's the wording they use, where they're like, oh, yes, they built professional. Yeah, so... I am... let's see. How the hell do they translate king from Japanese into prince in English? That's not what it was saying. What it's saying is that there is a description where it does refer to them as a king and queen. I can't remember if the localization is inconsistent there, because other descriptions do call them prince and princess. So, like, I don't necessarily think that might have been a localization error. Anyway, but okay, yeah, this all looks good. So let's go back to the mannequins.
Without a doubt, Queen Mytha's mannequins are created with the same art of puppetry used in Alkan and Ven, and Gilligan recounts her marriage to the ruler of the castle, beyond, the Earthen Peak, namely the Iron King of Iron Keep. Gilligan also claims that Mytha's husband was originally in love with someone else, which lines up perfectly with the former prince of Alkan's forbidden romance. And so, the old Iron King with his mighty soul, and the later King of Alkan with his tortured heart, are undoubtedly one and the same. Why then was the new King of Alkan so weak? It may have been a result of Alkan's aggression. If a kingdom constantly invaded its neighbor since their two countries' inception, but failed to either conquer the opposing kingdom or make any noticeable progress against them, the stalemate would inevitably tax their coffers. Basically, Alkan's endless onslaught wasted wealth and resources, throwing itself into a brick wall until its offense finally burned out. That the prince even became king intimates that disaster befell the previous monarch. No matter the new king's personal ability from a soul forged in battle, this would greatly diminish Alkan's military strength and threaten the royal family's hegemony over its territories. What would stop infighting by self-interested noble factions from further destabilizing the kingdom? The king of Alkan needed some saving grace to consolidate power around his central government and turn things around, and he found that in the form of foreign aid. A strange knight from the Far East was visiting the kingdom of Alkan and must have demonstrated his fighting prowess as it caught the feeble king's attention. He begged the foreign warrior to train his soldiers in his people's unusual swordplay. The stranger, for his part, accepted the request. But skill aside, the foreigner's fighting style stood out simply because the so-called knight is actually a samurai. This Alon wears armor not too dissimilar from Shiva, another samurai of the Far East from DS1. He also wields a katana, specifically a nagamaki with its extra-long handle, and the knights he taught use asymmetrical gray bows resembling those used in samurai martial arts. Like Shiva, Alon appears to have been a ronin, wandering the world west of home. However, the company he keeps suggests that this isn't because he is undead. Rather, it is probably his weapon that is to blame. Alon's katana is a kind of cursed sword infamous in Japanese legend. These Yutu tend to become possessed by evil due to their makers or the sheer amount of blood they shed.
Oh, for a second, I had to do a double take. I'm like, oh, that's just how it's pronouncing it. Okay.
Blood, and it speaks to Alon's skill if he killed so many. However, these cursed swords are also dangerous, bewitching to their owners as much as the enemy struck down by them with such mastery. We can witness the dangers for ourselves. Alon occasionally draws out a black and white aura which he can unleash as a wave. When stabbed with this latent evil, the cursed aura turns red and empowers the weapon. This also occurs should the wielder stab him or herself by performing seppuku. The sword thrives on blood and death, indifferent to the source. Some legends even say that Yutu cannot be sheathed without a kill, even controlling their owners to this end. When failing to land a single blow throughout our entire duel, Alon does commit seppuku, possibly to appease the blade's bloodlust
I don't
as
know
much
why,
as
just the way she says it.
The underlying cause of this is sure to be the souls imbued into the sword from the blood of its victims plus, perchance, its maker. The aura's color invokes humanity, implicating a dark curse which demands more death. The obvious reason for the victims to have this sentiment is spite, dragging down others to vindicate their own deaths. After accumulating so many deaths on the battlefield, the collective curse gains strength over the sword's owner, the very image of blood flow upon it bewitching them. Alon must have a strong will to resist this siren's call for blood when his blade appears to have no sheath. But that wouldn't matter to Alon's peers in the east. A man compelled to kill would sooner be driven out for the threat he poses to everyone around him. Forced into vagrancy through no fault of his own, the banished warrior wandered aimlessly until finally entering the king of Alkin's court. Despite the country's circumstance at the time, Alon apparently saw the man's potential to be a great king, ultimately deciding to serve as the monarch's knight. Perhaps it was because the vassal was rejected by his lord back home for simply serving his purpose as a fighter. After experiencing something like that, an honorable samurai would want to serve someone of virtue who actually required his talents. Still, Alon had made a name for himself as the Iron King's right-hand man and most trusted counsel, having contributed to his lord's acquisition of the throne. That level of involvement is no doubt why the Eastern warrior's name is Aaron, in reference to the Japanese spelling of the English iron or Aaron. A weak king placed his faith in a stranger during his hour of need, and his desperation was rewarded. With Alon's help, Alkin turned its bleak situation around. Based on the scorching iron scepter's description, the king had discovered massive iron reserves where Broom Tower was built. It may have been Alon who noticed these during his travels and relayed the information to his new lord. It would certainly be fresh on the mind as he was passing by. Majrold states that the castle's fine quality iron was harvested from this area during his stay there, which can be referring to the wider region. Surveying the geography of Broom Tower reveals a rocky terrain similar to the mountain range the Iron Keep is situated in. I don't like
using certainly here. Feasibly, I think, would be better. And then we put a emphasis on wood. It would feasibly be fresh on the mind. Yeah, something like this. I think that's a better way to put it, right? Because it would feasibly be fresh on the mind as he was passing by. And then we get to Majrold State. Because now we get to establish, oh yeah, it's actually really close in the area and stuff like that. And then afterwards we'll be discussing all the apparent reasons that Alkin and Ven didn't notice it before.
Majrold states that the castle's fine quality iron was harvested from this area during his stay there, which can be referring to the wider region. Surveying the geography of Broom Tower reveals a rocky terrain similar to the mountain range the Iron Keep is situated in. Likewise, pools and rivers of lava, the entire land, whereas said castle sits on a lake of magma visible upon a distant highland from Harvest Valley. Comparable to a caldera lake on a plateau according to the game's director Yui Tanamura in the Dark Souls 2 Design Works interview. Although this still doesn't justify the nonsensical lift straight up to the Iron Keep from inside Earthen Peak, Tanamura later in the interview confirms that Broom Tower is, indeed, an extension of the same place. We can therefore assume that this so-called remote region of Ven was still relatively close for the king of Alkin's castle to find on the border region. A corpse in Broom Tower carries the simpleton's ring, worn by warriors who received the king's divine protection when they departed for the front, making the future tower's location the edge of enemy territory. The fact that this area was previously controlled by said enemy speaks to the king's weakness, Ven having pushed its borders all the way up to Alkin's heartland. The kingdom owned so little territory when Alon finally entered the picture. Furthermore, Ven's implicit ignorance about its own iron reserves clarifies why it failed to prevent such a weak kingdom's conquest. They simply didn't know the value of this otherwise barren land far removed from either side's main traffic and so didn't adequately defend the border. Granted, the truth should have been apparent at a glance. Broom Tower and its satellite facilities have all been constructed atop huge light gray pillars jutting out of the charred ground, those supporting the main tower integrated into a more conventional mountain. We can navigate inside one of these pillars after descending into the bowels of the tower. The area's name? Iron Passage. In other words, all that gray rock is iron or ready to be processed. However, their bizarre formation came about in this volcanic land. Anyone on the horizon could have identified the rock if they had the curiosity to investigate. That such striking oddities went unnoticed for so long almost beggars belief. Being a borderland is thus the only explanation for neither country exploiting these deposits sooner. That also makes Alon, a foreigner exploring the Western world as a free spirit, that much more likely to have stumbled upon them first. Even if he did have only the Easterners' word to go by, it was still the perfect target with the perfect solution to the king's perfectly hopeless situation. With his back against the proverbial wall, what did he have to lose on one gamble? Now that the knights were trained in Alon's peculiar Eastern swordplay, Alkin might as well risk invading to take the land. And once conquered, the weak king built towering facilities to mine, smelt, and forge the iron. Architecture decorated with images of blossoming flowers and the sun, holy icons used to symbolize fire in Aenor Londo religion since DS1. The king's faith was rewarded, and he didn't take it for granted. Ven wouldn't be taking Alkin's invasion lying down. The enemy most likely did try to take back lost ground, once they had realized the king's maneuver. But by the time they mobilized a concerted effort, it was simply too late. It is no mystery why this region had become so critical for both countries. Controlling the iron was a matter of both economic and national security. Iron is, of course, essential to a medieval society's military prowess. The Iron King's knights wore iron armor and wielded steel katana, which were beautiful and solid thanks to the excellent casting techniques of his new iron facilities. And with an abundance of iron to spare, Alkin was capable of mass-producing arms and armors as showcased by the various accoutrements found throughout the ironworks. For example, both the strength and dexterity rings are malformed iron bands imbued with the metal's divine protection to help give the Iron King's soldiers an edge in combat. More importantly, their shoddy craftsmanship shows a willingness to experiment with the surplus. Something can be seen with the melted iron axe that became the smelter hammer. As the ring's descriptions relate, the king now had the power to freely transform iron as if he were creating life, in some cases, pushing the limits for the actual creation of life. The ironclad soldiers are iron golems, the old Iron King, crafted with iron for the soul's frame. Such heavy iron soldiers are a huge step up from the puppets of Belfry Soul and make for a far more formidable opponent than your common soldier, but they weren't even the end goal. As we explore Broom Tower, we see chains raising and lowering frames of hides old night golems. The Iron King has seemingly been attempting to recreate the ancient country's mighty puppets. A corpse found in Harvest Valley also carries their pike and great shield, reaffirming this implication of prior research. This explains why the full moon sickles used by Alkan undead of the Huntsman's Copse are made with Braden steel, a metal derived from hides similarly special alloy. It also proves that Drangliak wasn't the first to try reverse engineering that mysterious metal. That said, the lack of active Heidi golems in Alkan lands and Braden steel in Alkan wares insinuates that
Yeah, that's another one. This is from before the update, but like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with like, there's no other way to describe the undead hunters, right? Like anything else would be me having to go like, you know, in depth about Huntsman's Copse, which I don't want to do, right? It's like I have to talk about stuff like, you know, Mytha. It's like Mytha's okay generally because it's just establishing like some basic facts that like I don't think requires any like further thought beyond just like, oh yeah, the game tells you that. But this thing with like the thing was like, okay, yeah, Alkan undead in the Huntsman's Copse. Yes, that is technically accurate, but like, you know, establishing that requires a little bit more explanation. So like, but there's no better place to put the Braden steel stuff. Like, this is the most appropriate place for it. I really hate that. Iron seems to have some sort of innate power in the cosmology of DS. All games reference it. To be fair, it's the terminology being used. This is a terminology that you'll see often translated as divine protection, right? But you can always look at it as just it's saying like, oh, it's got super special, awesome protection, right? But yeah, I agree with you. There's a lot of references to iron having like, you know, this some sort of supernatural like effect, which you could argue maybe is true for everything in Souls. Like everything exerts some magical force because it has some like element of souls in it, right? You know, that makes it different from rock. But yeah, the idea with iron is definitely that, you know, like, you know, it's strong, it's hard, you know, it's a good solid metal, it will protect you. It will protect you divinely. Does she say, "Hey, no long Loom Doom"? Not Loom Doom, but oh yeah. My favorite love square. Anyway, so we got that covered.
They had only just started manufacturing them when the ironworks halted production completely. Even so, drawing a continuous line from the Iron Keep to the Huntsman's Copse, which is linked to the Heiden ruins via the Loop Temple, gives Alkan a pathway for investigating the civilization. There is only one problem. It completely surrounds the lost Bastille overland. Considering how close Ven bordered the king's castle, it is hard to imagine the country allowing such a massive territorial advantage during its period of weakness. In fact, its holdings must have extended as far out as the Shaded Woods, given that the Bellkeepers know a recreation of Awalisile's hidden weapon spell. Therefore, all of these areas in between must have been part of Ven's domain at the time. But after securing the iron at Broom Tower, Alkan pressed the offensive north and then west to seize these lands, gradually boxing Ven in. That would also fit with why Alkan looks to have only just begun replicating Heiden golems before its collapse. It took time to establish that territorial land bridge. In that case, the only thing that stands out about Alkan's sweep over the periphery is leaving the heartland. There is no evidence of subjugating the lost Bastille, taking all of Ven's holdings along with its capital outright. Instead, Alkan seemed to have deliberately avoided striking directly at its age-old foe. Why? The obvious answer would be the Iron King's affection for the enemy queen. Perhaps this small mercy was his gift to her for their eternal, if unfulfilled love. He may have even been returning the favor. After all, why hadn't Ven taken advantage of Alkan's previous weakness? Was it not the perfect opportunity to rid themselves of their nemesis once and for all? Maybe they were just that dedicated to their intellectual pursuits. But if its queen, partial to Alkan's new king, had lobbied against a counterattack and sued for peace, then this gave the ample opportunity for Alkan to make its comeback. Now Ven was essentially under siege and would never threaten the kingdom again. The old Iron King would at least leave her and her home with their pride as an independent nation. Whatever the case, these huge strides in technology and territory show just how major the massive iron reserves really were. But even that paled in comparison to their economic impact. Any country that mined such a huge supply of iron would see its price plummet within its borders. Production of not just military wares, but general products would become dirt cheap, and the rest of the surplus would be used to make the country a major exporter. And since these iron mines and factories were royal-owned, it reaped all the rewards of these sales. In one fell swoop, the Iron King stimulated his country's economy, expanded its border, acquired the means to defend his assets, forced his governing nobles into dependency, and amassed a tidy fortune. This was the political calculation behind a weak king invading Ven, and Alon was invaluable in this effort whether his contribution was drilling, apprising, fighting, or strategizing. And it all paved the way for a golden age built on iron. So much iron that excess amounts were used in the various doors, keys, and ornaments created during his reign.
All right, so I'm actually curious if I want to mention that here because I kind of allude to it in the next one, but maybe it's just a good transition. I hear people say Alon's armor is a mix of Western and Eastern styles. I can give it a more deeper look. I just kind of be like, oh yeah, I see that vague resemblance to some stuff that Sheba wears, right? And I just noticed like the strictly Eastern stuff. I'm like, how much is it really Western and how much is it like fantasy Eastern, right? So like maybe I'll have to see if there's any like specific posts with people talking about that and can identify like, you know, the pieces that are distinctly Western. I have no problem with that, honestly. Ultimately, the point is just making it be like, yeah, there's very there's very obviously, it's very obvious by looking at him that he's a samurai, right? From his armor to his weapons to all that. Alright, overall, I'm very happy with the additions to Alon, too. I kind of always kind of just, like, talk about, like, oh yeah, the token Eastern guy that comes in, but I didn't really give too much thought to, you know, why is he a Ronin wandering over all the way in this part of the world? And, you know, what about what's going on with his sword and stuff? But, you know, sitting down, you know, giving it some thought or whatever, I was like, you know what? Actually, there is, like, a kind of interesting story that ties into, like, you know, why he's being, like, just the good guy for Iron King. So, I actually really appreciate that. I'm really happy with, you know, like, you know, giving his character, you know, a little more attention. Alright, so, next, the fun section.
Drown in decadence.
Mm-hmm.
Because of its importance, the old Iron King personally oversaw the whole creation process. The main tower is divided into 5 stratums, with throne rooms located at both the top and bottom floors. This indicates that the monarch made regular visits to the facility, where he would supervise production from the gears moving iron production to the residue piling up at the base. His involvement went even deeper thanks to the scorching iron scepter, a ceaselessly hot rod usable as a staff for a king to wield, specifically to light the flames powering the different towers' mechanisms, controlling every facet of production. The king had made sure that he was the undisputed ruler of this land. So often he wanted to leave for a second castle. The king made travel between the two easy. The altar in the deepest depths of Iron Keep warps us to the satellite tower we exit to explore Broom Tower proper. The ironworks truly couldn't run without its Iron King. These personal chambers were also a necessity in the event that Ben came to take back the land, requiring he take to the field with the garrison. Even this might have been fed back into managing iron production. More than a few jail cells have been carved out in the iron passage where mining operations should be occurring, installing levers to open each cell block and fireball traps to dissuade rushing out before the overseers were in position to act. This suggests that Alkin relied on forced labor to handle the digging, and who better to make their workers than prisoners of war? Put simply, the Iron King probably began enslaving Ben's soldiers to shuffle into the mines, letting the enemy fuel Alkin's war machine as he expanded its borders and recruited more workers. They were definitely expendable if the corpse with the dispelling ring created by Strayed is any indication, trapped behind a destructible wall in the tower. It was a ruthless, if effective policy that benefited from his presence on site. All that said, the practicality of it may have been overshadowed by the king's artistic whimsy. Shalquar ponders whether all humans' tendency to show off reflects a desire to be beautiful, specifically mentioning the unsightly iron castles they build in pursuit of that end.
Like, what the fuck,
This is a transparent reference to the Iron Keep which the Iron King constructed and implies that his involvement in production was motivated as much by a sense for aesthetics as anything sensible. For sure, he created the needlessly heavy iron key to enter Broom Tower as a show of his newfound power. The metal became profoundly tied to strength for him, skyrocketing its appeal to his mind. The beauty of strength made iron his obsession, immersing himself so deep that it became more a pastime. A chest in Iron Keep stores destructive great arrows specialized in breaking armor. While his knights loved to employ them with their gray bows, the king may have liked them for experimenting with his iron's resilience. All of this culminated with the construction of Iron Keep. The area is specifically a melted iron castle, in reference to it sinking in lava to varying extents. The term localized as smelter in other instances uses the same kanji as molten iron, so it refers to when the metal has been affected by flame in some way. It isn't the castle's formal name, but is nevertheless the one that Iron King built, though how much so is ambiguous. Despite the name, the vast majority of the area is comprised of stone and marble, not iron. And accounting for continued existence of Belfry Sol, it is possible that the old Iron King simply built upon the existing architecture, renovating the original royal palace with new iron adornments. Given the importance of religion in Alkin, the statues of robed men either orating with an open scroll or clasping their hands in prayer lends further credence to this idea. Even if not a castle of pure iron, he added more than enough to attract Triclops snakes. Pills for the three-eyed serpents are typically acquired underground, sold by the Rat King or looted from certain enemies. This intimates the reptiles as mostly subterranean. And yet, a single other source for Triclops snake troches is a corpse in Iron Keep. Why there when there is nothing petrifying to resist with the pills? The most likely answer is because of their diet. Why have a third eye to petrify potential prey unless that is the ideal? The serpents must prefer slithering through rocky caverns deep beneath the surface because they eat minerals, rarer metals naturally being their favorite. And with so much iron ornamenting one castle, it is just as natural for some to be drawn to the place and be stamped out like the vermin they are. It is thus still fair to say that any renovations constituted constructing an Iron Keep. Whether his new home's construction was conservative or radical, the king made sure to display his power both literally and figuratively. The castle's walls and furniture are often decorated with symbols for strength.
That Triclops snake was basically the very last thing I've added, and that's because I can't find anywhere else to put it. It's always weird when talking about the troches, or troches, as this thing likes to pronounce it. But the thing, like, because like you just have like the pills, right? And you have to reverse engineer from the pills what they're going for with stuff, and then of course where you find the pills. And I do think that it's like worth like talking about and mentioning and stuff here, but I can't like fit it in the Great Shift stuff, right? Because I mentioned like, you know, just wildlife and stuff, but going like on a giant aside about them is kind of much, especially considering like, you know, there's so many of them. We talk a bit about them in the Giant Kingdom as well when we're talking about dark bugs and trying to tie that back into the giants. So I think that's an appropriate place for that. In Haida, we mentioned now the cut yellow jellyfish troches, and I've recently added the hermit crab thing from Zuli's recent video, which was really good, by the way. Everyone should check that one out. And then there's the leech ones, which kind of get referenced, you know, like every now and then. So, like, I feel like I've covered, like, most of the troches. But then there's, like, this one troch where it's like, okay, there's a troch in Iron Keep that's obviously supposed to be, like, okay, they like eating rocks, right? Like, their whole thing is, you know, petrifying prey and devouring it, you know, going underground and stuff like that, right? So I think this is the best place for it. But I'm not sure how natural it sounds, especially considering, like, I'm trying to work it in as a justification of being, like, okay, like, clearly, like, yeah, it's not all iron, but clearly it's enough iron, at least, right? Enough iron that it's attracting these snakes here and nowhere else. Well, you may feel strange about this. I made a fanfic in the Dark Souls world many, many years ago. I stopped, but your book reignited my flame. I'm redoing it with your book for lore references. Oh, that's cool! I mean, like, listen, for me, there's nothing weird about people who do fan fictions or fan art or any of that jazz, right? Like, here's the thing. I like it when that stuff is lore accurate, but I don't really care, because ultimately it's fan works, right? Like, there's plenty of great fan art that I've, like, retweeted, not using the new name, because it's just so good. Although I will say, that one Artorias art that I retweeted a while back, that was, like, 100% lore accurate, like, actual log-flowing blue cape, like, you know, sword in left hand, armor restored. I was like, ooh, perfect. It was the greatest thing ever. So yeah, like, awesome. It's great when people are like, you know, using my work for whatever they want to do, right? Like, that's what it's there for, is for people to be able to do what they want with it. Anyway. Let's get back to it.
Strength, power, boldness, and courage. These include statues of griffins and ornaments of lions, but the most...
Let's start from the beginning of this paragraph, just so to make sure I'm...
Whether his new home's construction was conservative or radical, the king made sure to display his power both literally and figuratively. The castle's walls and furniture are often decorated with symbols for strength, power, boldness, and courage. These include statues of griffins and ornaments of lions, but the most pervasive is images of bulls, so much so that an iron bull arguably emblemizes the old Iron King's reign. Even the copious water urns for dealing with the heat found at Iron Keep and Broom Tower feature the horned bovine. Collectively, these icons convey an image of dominance, contrasting his prior weakness as king. Was this warranted? His past political and financial vulnerabilities clearly made him, at least, feel insecure no matter his aptitude as a warrior. From the Iron King's perspective, he needed to project strength at home and abroad. Besides iron arms and armor, his force is also associated with the bound wooden shield, which bears the image of a lion. The enemy needed to know that his kingdom was a formidable player on the world stage. After reaching the Iron Keep, we need to cross a bridge before entering the actual castle. Along the way, we pass under an archway inlaid with the aforementioned statues of holy men, only they have been wrapped in chains pinned with swords. Chain cages also hang over the lava moat on either side of the bridge. Both of these trace back to the same source, another statue holding the reins front and center atop the arch. The meaning would be clear to any visitor, and whether political dissident or prisoner of war, the message was the same. In this king's domain, iron rules, and he is its sovereign. This propaganda extended to his private life. As his cavalier use of iron swords at his doorstep would signal, the old Iron King collected many weapons merely to exemplify his authority. This hobby might seem excessive, but what real harm was there in amassing fancy arms befitting a rich warrior like himself? As the covetous gold serpent ring found at the castle elucidates in its description, only a coward would miss out on a good opportunity simply for fear of the danger, and there was none yet. However, these small indulgences snowballed soon enough. The man wanted to make himself look better by trumpeting the power and riches he adopted, so his greed continuously fed into his own ego until it was nothing but excess. The Japanese description for the ironclad helm notes that the old Iron King had at one point approached the profound mysteries of the soul the same as Vendrick and Eldia after him. This makes sense so far as he alone had both the knowledge and resources to investigate the nature and origin of the soul through the golems he was creating. Had the man considered the deeper implications to the power behind life, he may well have discovered the throne of want and become a lord of cinder. Instead, he drowned in the pleasure his vast fortune afforded him. Aside from boasting the depths of his coffers and the strength of his ironclad army, the old Iron King had tried creating an iron dragon. We do find plenty of petrified dragon bones and some things in his castle, with more at Broom Tower. There is no sign of an actual iron dragon, but it is very revealing about where the king's priorities lied. Dragons are associated with strength thanks to their resilience and might.
Light
While
or
there may be
lay?
value in researching the nature and
Pretty sure it's
origin
supposed
of
to
these
be lay,
qualities,
right?
replicating a facsimile with iron serves no purpose other than to produce yet another symbol of the king's power. Indeed, while concept art only depicts vague
I'm pretty sure it should be lay, right? But it's very revealed about where the king's priorities lie. I'm pretty sure it's lay. No, because lay is present tense. Maybe it is lied. Oh, what the hell? Maybe I'm crazy. Is this a script for a new book on DS2? It could be. I mean, we'll see. I'm currently doing last year I was doing reviews for DS2, but something personal happened in my life that kind of derailed all that. So I wasn't able to kind of like, go over the finish line. But now I'm back to it, and like I got this Alkin Invent update done, which was honestly, it was one of the most daunting ones of all of them, like by far. But I got it done pretty quickly. I ended up going like really smoothly. Part of that's because a lot of the content is still like really good, so like a lot of paragraphs I didn't really have to tweak or anything. I could just be like, okay, done. But generally speaking, I just think, I don't know. I think it was good to have a change of pace after doing so much Elden Ring. Because Elden Ring is just so, God, it's so intensive. Elden Ring is like, God, that's when you're doing like hard mode, man. Like you really gotta like put your brain power to the max to be able to keep up, because there's just so much data points you gotta keep track of at any given moment. Bro, want a big dragon doll, but end up with nothing. Yeah. Live would be best. Should it be live then? Where the king's priorities lie. I'm gonna leave it as light for now. I'm gonna look that up later. I'm gonna look that up just to be sure.
Dragons are associated with strength thanks to their
Clearly,
resilience
I'm too
and might.
stupid to know
While there may
grammar.
be value in researching the nature and origin of these qualities, replicating a
Hope things got
facsimile with
me-
iron serves
yeah,
no
it's
purpose
fine,
other
it's
than
fine,
to produce
it's fine.
yet
It's just,
another symbol
it
of the king's
completely
power.
derailed me during the
Indeed,
end of that
while
year. So I was
concept
like,
art
okay,
only
yeah, there's no way I'm
depicts vague
finishing it
brushstrokes,
this year.
his knight
But now
captains
I want to
game had
finish
the dragon crest
DS2 by
featured on
summer,
Yorga's
so
ring
that's gonna be the
plastered
new
across their
goal. And
oversized
Night Rain's
shoulder
in a month,
plates.
so
The same
pray
is
for
true
me.
for the yellow quartz shield native to the Iron Keep. The dragon's significance certainly wasn't lost on the
Oh,
monarch,
pray for me.
Pious Alkin likely inheriting the symbol from the religion which Yorg inadvertently spawned. But the
Oh,
Iron
Lord
Dragon
have
itself would
mercy.
bring the old Iron King no closer to the truth of the soul. There was no deeper contemplation of the power he toyed with, just shallow and uninspired shells to house it. This superficiality extended to the old Iron King's personal relationships, too. The kingdom's prosperity allowed him to invite various dubious guests from foreign lands into his court. This openness may have come from past experience, but the fact that it was specifically his opulence which attracted
Dude
him
is
proves
vibing.
how misguided he was. Many of these foreigners were charlatans, all too happy to feed the Iron King's ego in order to earn his favor, and maybe a smidgen of his assets.
Yeah, ER,
Only
you
a
need
few
to
actually
lock
contributed
in.
anything of value to his kingdom, the most notable of which is Igel. This pyromancer is the only
Igel?
named individual known to have served the king besides Alon, implying that he was held in a similar standing to the trusted knight, and just as Alon references the king's love of iron, Egil references his love of sword. Meaning sword's edge in Old Norse.
Okay,
The spells he created
Egil,
are
I'm pretty
only
sure
found
is
at Rune
right, but
Tower, so if
Igel?
nothing else, he
How
was
do you see
definitely
that
a legitimate
Y and go,
spellcaster.
yeah,
More
Igel?
importantly, though, their location is proof that he was present in the king's precious ironworks.
Poor
Igel had more than likely curried enough favor with the old Iron King to be entrusted with managing the iron facilities in his lord's absence. The monarch didn't need to run a nation or bask in the comfort and luxury of home. Likewise, Igel's use of pyromancy indicates that he was more interested in using an iron furnace than joining the king's exotic company. Therefore, putting him in charge was the most logical decision. That doesn't make him any different, of course. The massive iron bull statue ornamenting the Iron Keep is dubbed Igel's Iron Statue, meaning that he was the one who gifted his lord such an oversized icon. This feat would be impossible without access to the kingdom's ironworks, and the lever inside controls the flames which other bull constructs flare out throughout the whole castle. He was in charge of all things fire and iron related. It shows
Right.
that even the king's most competent retainers knew to tickle his ego to get in his good
sorcery.
graces, and it worked. All of this debauchery must have brought Alon no end of frustration, horror, and disappointment. This was no longer the noble, love-struck king he chose to serve. He saw money and power turn him into a depraved, corrupt hedonist hellbent on wasting away his life in the lap of luxury.
All
What was
right.
the point of helping the king achieve that prosperity? What was the point of him even being there? To try putting his lord back on the right path? But whatever attempts Alon may have made to advise the Iron King, they evidently all failed to convince him to reform. As Shalquar infers, the monarch didn't realize how truly ugly his actions had become beneath the superficial glamour. In his strive to improve his image, he instead ended up becoming more vulgar than ever. And after a certain point, Alon just gave up on him, deciding to leave his lord for a new land when his master's kingdom had reached its zeitgeist, or at least, he should have. After we acquire both the Ashen Mist Heart and the Iron King's crown, the latter seems to react to Alon's sword and armor set up in a display room beneath the topmost throne of Broom Tower, triggering a memory. If we enter the world of that memory, we will find ourselves at the Iron Keep, going by the architecture. This is a part of the castle we cannot explore in the present era, presumably the innermost portion which has completely collapsed into the lava and become the old Iron King's boss room, only his private teleport point to Broom Tower remaining. The boss room for the memory is an antechamber to another throne room, flooring a shiny marble reflecting the twilight clouds outside the arched windows. The iron throne in the next room identical to the one half buried in ash at the bottom of Broom Tower. However, in order to reach this throne, we must fight through not only his knights, but even Alon. The boss is sitting on the floor when we enter the antechamber and immediately engages us in combat. If we happen to defeat him effortlessly, he will technically deal the final blow, but we undoubtedly cause the death of the knight who had supposedly left on a new journey regardless. This apparent contradiction is unlikely to be a developer oversight since the description for the Alon Knight Captain set reiterates his loss of faith and departure following the big fix. We undoubtedly travel to a period when the old Iron King was still alive and recently present in the area. In fact, the smelter wedge left on his throne suggests that the king had only just returned from the ironworks, where we acquire so many. This also most likely occurs after the two parted on bad terms. The way Alon sits cross-legged, while not uncommon for samurai, is considered less polite and potentially offensive in the presence of a lord. That the vassal doesn't mind his etiquette when the king could walk in at any moment shows how he doesn't respect the king enough to show the courtesy. So, why is he there? The presence of Alon's unique armor and weapon at Broom Tower posits that his death at Iron Keep is part of yet another time loop scenario. In all likelihood, the samurai did leave for foreign lands, only to later return to the lord he abandoned in an attempt to reconcile. He was awaiting a formal audience with the king, only to die just before they could have a proper reunion. Perhaps the warrior didn't want to return to wandering unless his country, once again, forced him out. It is reasonable for his close relationship with the king to give him second thoughts about labeling him a lost cause after the two spent some time apart. If the Iron King valued the swordsman at all, he might still find it in his heart to listen. Thus, for closure's sake, Alon chose to either convince his unrespectable master or face expulsion from this earth, it turned out. And for what it is worth, his lord did seem to want him back. Alon's departure prompted the old Iron King to name the knights he had trained after him. And following his death to some random assassin they never managed to capture, the monarch had the samurai's equipment enshrined below his throne in Broom Tower. Maybe he intended to make it the basis for future designs. With plans to update the Alon Knights equipment, Broom Tower does look to have been experimenting for their sake, specifically. Invading us in one of the satellite towers is Rachel, a fencer who loves to coat her mundane bastard sword in a variety of oozes and resins for power. Her offhand carries the hollow soldier shield, which serves as the basis for the yellow quartz shield. On top of that, she dons the old knight set with an Alon Knight helm. In short, the swordswoman appears to be a knight of Alkan who is testing the new golem armor for the Iron King, seeing its potential to replace their iron. And once finished experimenting, why not model the final iteration more closely on Alon? Whether the samurai's equipment was expected to serve as a reference point or mere novelty for the old Iron King, it nevertheless demonstrates his care and respect for the man who helped prop him up. Reinforcing this, Nadalia holds his crown while sitting upon his lowermost throne of the ironworks, as if the monarch left it behind feeling unworthy of its weight alone. Not having his closest confidants by his side all of a sudden may have taken him by surprise and made him reconsider how he had disregarded his knight until then. If the memory is any indication, he could have been rushing over upon hearing of Alon's return as we carved our own way through, ready to talk things out. Being greeted with only a fresh corpse must have been devastating. Had I only heeded you sooner, this never would have happened, might have crossed his mind. That being said, Alon's tragic death wasn't enough for the king to mend his hedonistic ways. If anything, the grief might have driven him to drown deeper in the pleasures which debauchery afforded him.
What?
Corrupts absolutely.
How? How? How?
As we explore the
How
king's
do you
castle,
miss?
we come across blast furnaces, iron smelters, and even platforms to lower into the lava. He clearly turned his home into a factory, but why? Broom Tower fulfilled all his needs, so what was there to manufacture there that he couldn't create elsewhere? The answer is his ultimate creation. The smelter demon was to be another of the Iron King's golems, only this puppet would be forged with the lava the castle stood upon. He likely wanted to imbue both body and soul with the power of fire which the magma radiated. As if to convey that exact concept, a local chest stores the life ring with twinkling titanite, the minerals for each infused with life or light. As for the actual boss, its two halves are connected by a spinal column far too thin to support the weight without the help of the flames blazing in the gap, pointing to it being intrinsic to the design. By using lava to construct the frame and power the core, the puppet's resulting strength and agility puts even Einar Londo's Iron Golem from DS1 to shame, and that in itself was probably the goal. Like the old Iron King, the porcine shield is worthless for its expected purpose, only reminding onlookers of greedy, gluttonous pigs. Conveniently, it is part of his weapon collection, stored within a chest right after the smelter demon. Kept with it are a bunch of flame butterflies, whose firepower we use to light a torch. Taken together, bringing the lava golem to life was to be this insatiable king's greatest extravagance, the crown jewel of his debauchery. With the horns and claws unnecessarily included in the design, this puppet might also be the iron dragon he had been working towards. Indeed, the gaping hole for a face could easily facilitate fire breath, and Ben's gargoyles prove that the kingdoms knew how to imbue a mineral body with fire to recreate those circumstances for dragons. If the idea was to create an iron dragon which retained the form and fighting prowess of a man, then this was undoubtedly the king's most ambitious and excessive project yet. It comes as no surprise then to encounter a prototype in the Iron Passage, opened with the tower key whose description makes sole mention of the dragon. It is nigh identical to the frame found in Iron Keep, but significantly older and embodying blue flames of a sorcery nature. The sorcery clutch ring within a chest close by in Broom Tower reaffirms the hint. The magic power was likely intended to substitute for that of the lava and serve as a proof of concept for the golem's design. As to its origin, Igel was the probable caster, and not just because the test model tries appealing to the king with more bull-like horns. Although we can only acquire his pyromancies, the man himself is never actually called a pyromancer. Instead, he is identified by the much vaguer term arts expert at the root to both pyromancer and sorcerer. Aegil may have been fascinated with fire, but that doesn't limit him to just one school of magic, especially considering how often sorcery and pyromancy are taught in tandem in the New World. And this Magus certainly had motive for contributing to this particular project. Aegil wanted to imbue fire with the appearance of a will at minimum, essentially making the flames look as if they were alive. This is why he dubbed one of his spells Fire Snakes after its flame's resemblance to wriggling serpents fighting at their prey. The concept is feasible with humanity, but Aegil was apparently only just beginning to see the potential of the dark arts. While still dealing fire damage, his Dance of Fire resembles the dark pyromancy outcry in both its actual flames and menu graphic. Karthus would later complete his research in DS3, that being the case, directly imbuing a soul with fire power so strong it melts rock, encasing it in a suitable shell, and then inducing a will in it sounds like the next best thing. It may even be that the old Iron King had gotten the idea to create such a golem from the spellcaster. But regardless of whether Aegil had lobbied for it, it is hard to believe that the man didn't know about or participate in the Smelter Demon's creation. The older model encountered in the tower he oversaw had wandered into the mines, if not been stationed there, after all. With the prototype a success, they could move onto the final product. The golem's iron frame was completed, its core was set within it, and its body was submerged in the lava. Whether this event was intended to spark the soul's will or just imbue it with firepower and be brought to life at a later date, things don't go according to plan. The fire at the bottom of the earth responded to this new element, causing a chain reaction. The Smelter Demon sprung to life and gushed out of the lava along with a surge of flame. In a single swing of its blade, the beast killed its creator with the very fire he thought to control. The chest in the Iron Keep containing Chaos Storm highlights the irony. The pyromancy's description makes the Witch of Izalith into an allegory for those seeking power beyond their means inevitably being consumed by it. The text for Immolation, acquired from a belfry soul chest, ponders a similar sentiment. Nothing will stop someone from acquiring what they want, even if they get themselves burned. The king's death wasn't all, of course. The surge of magma had destabilized the Iron Keep, causing the whole castle to sink beneath the weight of its iron. What few parts of the castle we can still explore stand lopsided or flooded with lava. And floating on this magma is a chest containing the Phoenix Parma, which lost its original color as a result of the gushing fire. We can thereby be certain that much of the castle's lower levels have been submerged in the molten rock, though Madrold's second-hand account of the incident suggests that the castle was already gradually sinking from its weight even before the fire swallowed it. It was just the tipping point. Nothing speaks more to the old Iron King's hubris than the castle showcasing his glory being swallowed by the earth he was convinced would be conquered like the rest. And just as we acquire the gold serpent ring from a skeleton burning inside the lava filling one of the ironworking ladles, the king, in his greed for material possession, ended up sinking into the flame brought up by his precious iron. But for all his arrogance, Alkun still owed its resurgence and prosperity to their debaucherous king. The military especially benefited from his patronage. We encounter flame lizards in the Iron King's memory, aiding the knights with the fireballs they spew. They are most likely local fauna, absorbing and channeling the lava's power to their advantage. This includes building a habitat, as we witness them transform a corner of the Forest of Fallen Giants into a hellscape with their presence. Once all killed, the pillars of fire billowing from the charred ground cease. They look like oversized salamanders because fire lizard is the literal meaning of salamander, but they're...
Is there a reason why the blue Smelter Demon flame is blue? Well, like I said earlier in this document, the whole sorcery connection with Aegil and stuff seems to be the point, is that they're trying to establish, well, let's be honest, the underlying reason is because they wanted to at least do a lazy reskin for this boss, so that way it wasn't exactly the same, right? It's same with, like, retexturing it, so it has different horns and slightly different, like, body parts as well, right? But, like, the underlying reason why they went with blue is because Aegil's here and they want to go with the sorcery connection, right? Like, that's really all there is to it. And the idea of, like, okay, let's test it with magic, and if it works with magic, we can make it work is... Yeah. Oh, wait. I'm seeing a problem here, chat. Looks like there is a section that I did not actually finish here. This here. So... we have the stuff on the salamanders here, which I'm happy about. This, though, I'm going to have to try to figure out then. Because, yeah, I see what the problem is. Because I was trying to expand on this line up here, and then connect it down to here, right? And this was originally a small paragraph, right? Which is fine. But now I've expanded it to kind of talk more about, like, the things that he did outside of the iron to contribute, which would be the salamanders, right? So the question now is, okay, is there anything else I need to put in here to help tie us back to this point about the knights? So I'm going to have to think about that one. Okay, so we've seen that there. That's going to take more extensive work on me. I'm going to have
the
to
Elan
think that
Knights,
one over.
at least, seemed to recognize that fact,
Well, let's
for their
focus on what we
loyalty
got
was
here.
even stronger than iron, and this led all of them to follow their lord to their graves. As the melted iron castle sunk, the Elan Knights stayed behind to be swallowed by fire, perhaps inspired by example. Several Black Knight weapons do exist at the Iron Keep, with their wielders implied to still be remembered as servants of the King of Light in the descriptions. The Black Knight...
Oh. I think also what I want to do is I want to change this to recall that several Black Knight... Recall that several Black Knight weapons. Yeah, I think I want to do this where I talk about this, and then when we talk about his collection. This, I think I want to expand by including Black Knight sword, which I mentioned earlier in this analysis, but also the Great Axe, right? Also, just mention the number of shields, unique shields, I should say. So, like, yeah, I think I'm gonna include this there because we have, again, this is like, yeah, this is just 8 lines. Usually, I like my stuff to be around 9 lines. Like, I could do that where I talk about more like, oh, he's collected weapons to exemplify his authority, right? So I could talk about, like, we already have the Black Knight sword that we talked about earlier, but there's also the Black Knight Great Axe. Even outside of just faith, there's just various weapons and shields and things. Like, I think that is fair. All right, so going back down here. Yeah, okay. Yeah, all that seems good. Let's go from the salamander section, actually.
But for all his arrogance, Alkyn still owed its
We'll
resurgence
move
and
on from
prosperity
there.
to their debaucherous king. The military especially benefited from his patronage. We encounter flame lizards in the Iron King's memory, aiding the knights with the fireballs they spew.
Oh, my bad, wrong thing. My bad. There we go.
Spew. They are most likely local fauna, absorbing and channeling the lava's power to their advantage. This includes building a habitat, as we witness them transform a corner of the forest of fallen giants into a hellscape with their presence.
All right, all
Once
that's
all
been
killed,
covered. We can
the
also
pillars
add
of fire
that
billowing from the charred
sorcery.
ground cease. They look like oversized salamanders because fire lizard is the literal meaning of salamander, but their presence in Iron Keep functions akin to warhounds. It isn't easy to train them, based on the various fireball pyromancy texts we loot from their bodies. But at risk of being eaten, the Iron King has permitted the beasts for military use, with even the fireball trap in the Iron Passage being modeled on them. The point is that, even ignoring the iron, the King of Alkyn had treated his soldiers well, so they had every incentive to return the favor. We acquire. The Elan Knights, at least, seemed to recognize that
Yeah,
fact,
I have
for their
to- I have
loyalty
to
was
work on
even
this
stronger than
section here.
iron, and this led all of them to follow their
Alright.
lord to their graves. As the melted iron castle sunk,
Let's
the
get-
Elan
let's
Knights
get the
stayed
level
behind to be
up
swallowed
here.
by fire,
We're starting
perhaps
to go into
inspired by
attunement
example.
now.
Recall that several Black Knight weapons exist at the Iron Keep, with their wielders implied to still be remembered as servants of the King of Light in the
Okay, there we
descriptions.
go.
The Black Knights had also shared in their lord's demise by fire out of loyalty, and the parallels don't end there. Although the knights guard the castle to the present day, they are unaffected by soul appease and so not hollow and probably not even undead. Instead, they were scorched by flame, hence their armor is dull and dirty in contrast to the shiny and clean variant found in the game files. It also possesses notably higher fire resistance. More than likely, the Elan Knights faced in the Iron Keep are just their strong wills animating their equipment after their bodies had burned to ash, the same as the Black Knights. Some might argue that they can suffer from bleeding and poison, but so did their predecessors. Plus, they share the same ghastly death rattle. Intended emulation or not, the Elan Knights' similarities to the Black Knights extends to their respective lords as well. Shalquar alludes to a resemblance between the gaudy conceit of the Iron King and the vanity of Gwyn, and the connection isn't limited to their personalities. After his body and soul were swallowed by the earth, the deceased king encountered the soul of the ineffable Gwyn at the bottom and was possessed, twisting him into the demonic giant lurking beneath the surface of the molten rock lake prior to our arrival. The Great Lord's presence there isn't as random as one might think. Ask yourself, why did the old Iron King lose control over the smelter demon? Why did the lava react to his experiment? Why did he want to acquire the power of lava? Why was the capital of Alkyn founded upon a lake of lava? Why did the resulting country based around lava skew toward faith? All of these questions can be answered by the lava being a byproduct and extension of Gwyn's soul. Lava and volcanoes aren't natural occurring phenomena in Dark Souls. There is no mantle beneath the Earth's crust, just the lower world. There can thus be no plate tectonics triggering earthquakes that split the ground and upwell magma.
There we go.
And yet, we can see lava spewing from a mountain. How? The DesignWorks interview allude to a special reason for the magma's existence there. In DS1, lava was the product of the flame of chaos, flames derived from a lord soul so great that lava continued to spew from Izalith's cavern walls long after ravaging the land. But despite Alkyn's collection of chaos pyromancies, there is no evidence of the flame of chaos ever being present there. Instead, if the Witch of Izalith was capable of melting the very earth with the power of her lord soul, surely the soul of the most powerful of the 4 lords could do the same. Shalquar indicates that Gwyn has since become Icarus Earth, or Molten Earth. This is a very obvious reference to lava,
Huh?
and the term is reused in various item descriptions to describe the magma the Iron Keep sank in as well as what both Gwyn's soul and the Iron King had become. In other words, Gwyn is the molten earth surrounding the melted Iron Castle. The power of his soul generated heat that melted the rock of the nearby mountain, creating magma radiating his power. This is why the yellow quartz shield and longsword are covered in crystals found at the bottom of the sunken castle. Crystals of this color are otherwise only associated with holy lightning, the power of sunlight that Gwyn's lord soul held dominion over. These minerals are likely the crystallization of the earth liquefied by Gwyn's fire. An idea DS3 further explores with the Chaos Gems. If Alkyn heard stories of this molten earth being divinely derived, then the country's fascination with it and emphasis on religiosity is no mystery. The rock of this mountainous region has been imbued with the power Gwyn wields and so can be manipulated as an extension of his will, hence the lava's surprisingly violent reaction to the Iron King's direct attempt to harness its power, as well as that of the Smelter Demon. The description for the golem's soul wonders if the iron mass that possessed life had been in the molten earth from the start. This clearly isn't referring to the Smelter Demon itself, given its unambiguous origin according to other item descriptions. Therefore, it must refer to the essence of the iron mass, the will animating it in soul and body. As the name captures, it is a demon of melted iron, that is to say, iron that has been altered by the power of Gwyn. And if the King of Light controls the molten earth, would he not also influence the melted iron? The Smelter Demon came to life because the fire imbuing it with power had also granted it the will of another soul, a more powerful soul. And what was that soul's will? To indiscriminately rampage? Unlikely. Gwyn had spent his final centuries in the flesh as the guardian of the first flame, his soul both fueling the fire and protecting it from any potential threats. In fact, it is possible that his soul's ability to produce fire is linked to his one-time role as Lord of Cinder, as it was only after linking himself to the fire that the god was able to conjure and wield flames. This would imply that his soul is still tied to the first flame despite their long-time physical separation, a concept expanded upon with the Lords of Cinder in DS3. Regardless, it isn't an overstatement to say that the Great Lord's final will was the preservation of fire. In that light, his soul's generation of fire and violent reaction to attempts to subsume it makes sense. This will behind the fire would also explain why the Smelter Demon's armor set possesses Petrify and Curse resistance, attributes most commonly seen in tandem with magic casters and cursed individuals. Why possess the old Iron King then when Gwyn's soul had no apparent interest in directly controlling the Iron Puppet? It is possible that the god's soul felt an affinity for the other due to their like-minded egotism, and so instinctively assimilated it, at which point Gwyn's strong will reanimated the charred corpse and twisted into a new form. Still, the Iron King is nominally in control of this body, so the old one's influence may just be limited to exacerbating their shared feelings.
Is that just being weird? Cursed individuals. Strong rear the charred corpse, and yeah, it needs an it there, and twist into new form. Okay, there we go.
Still, the Iron King is nominally in control of this body, so the old one's influence may just be limited to exacerbating their shared feelings. When it comes to specifics, the king more resembles the Smelter Demon. Rather, despite the demonic overtones, many of the boss traits also overlap with dragons, from the wings to the horns to the snout to the fire breathe. Put another way, the Iron King became exactly what he wanted, a dragon man, the ultimately symbol of strength. He is essentially living.
Uh-oh, I'm being hit by something. I'm being hit by arrows somewhere. Where is it? Where are you shooting? Oh, you asshole. Yeah, do that, asshole. Okay. Alright, where were we? Let's see. Fire, breathe. Should be fire, breath. There we go. Alright. Okay. Back to this, then.
Still, the Iron King is nominally in control of this body, so the old one's influence may just be limited to exacerbating their shared feelings. When it comes to specifics, the king more resembles the Smelter Demon. Rather, despite the demonic overtones, many of the boss traits also overlap with dragons, from the wings to the horns to the snout to the fire breath. Put another way, the Iron King became exactly what he wanted, a dragon man, the ultimately symbol of strength. He is essentially living out his fantasy, soul basking in the glow of flame he can now freely wield. What mind has he to care about the destruction of his castle? This scorching hot feeling is everything he could ask for. Thanks to God, a human king.
God, I screwed this one up so bad. The ultimate symbol of strength. There we go. Back to this.
This scorching hot feeling is everything he could ask for. Thanks to God, a human king has reached his final debauchery. Otherwise, not much has changed for the dregs of the King of Light's once mighty soul. Until we approach the more ruined parts of Iron Keep, the old one remains beneath the surface of the molten earth with the Iron King. Unless someone is disturbing the king's fantasy with their distracting presence, neither cares for what goes on in his territory. Meanwhile, the Smelter Demon has been left to wander the sunken castle, though we appear to catch it resting when we first enter its boss room. The chamber also reserves the same giant braziers which react to the demon unleashing its firepower as an iron passage where we fight its blue counterpart, but this may be just for gameplay purposes and not reflect on the demon's interests. Regardless, the Elan Knights and ironclad soldiers continue their duties as if the castle is not halfway submerged in lava. And with the collapse of the government, the kingdom as a whole fell into chaos, including the ironworks. The soldiers and laborers of Broom Tower are all hollow. With no sign of enemy combatants, the old Iron King's troops more than likely turned on each other after his death, probably vying for control over their dead king's iron and by extension his kingdom. Whoever controlled Broom Tower controlled all the wealth in the nation, and the fact that a fair number of these hollows are missing their heads or legs suggests that greed brought out their brutality. But when the sit finally settled, the only ones left standing were the mad and immortal. Similar events probably occurred across the rest of the land, fracturing the country until it was inevitably reduced to ruin. In his avarice, Alkin's King of Iron destroyed all the things he had and had already obtained, leaving behind only crumbling monuments of his arrogance haunted by monsters. His inebriation and flame aside, one must wonder if it was worth everything he sacrificed, and everyone condemned to oblivion. With the old Iron King's fall, we must turn to the fate of Alkin's rival and its unnamed queen. How did she feel?
Right. So the Iron King / Gwyn connection could be Dark Souls' take on reincarnation. Kind of. It's not really reincarnation. It's more so possession. It's more like divine. It's more like kind of like the Hornsense divine invocation, sort of. The idea is like you're getting possessed by the spirit of a god, right? That's more so what they're going for, right? Really. Like, again, if the idea with reincarnation is just sort of the idea of like, oh, they inhabit and influence a body, then like, sure, kind of. But again, it's not like reincarnation as you would typically see it in like, say, Buddhism or something. So, I feel uncomfortable using that precise term. It's definitely more so like how you would think of possession.
With the old Iron King's fall, we must turn to the fate of Alkin's rival and its unnamed queen. How did she feel when the beloved whom she had shown mercy suddenly struck back before going on to essentially cage Ven? It must have been humiliating for the kingdom, but more than that, it must have been heartbreaking for her. A chest in Belfry Luna contains the blue tear stone ring, representing the blue tears cut the sheds for those who have lost loved ones. While the loss the goddess cries over is specifically death, it is true that the Princess of Ven had forever parted with her beloved ever since becoming queen. Nowhere was this loss more evident than after her sweetheart carried on Alkin aggression. Were they not both in the position to end their two countries' long history of bloodshed? Was this not the chance to unite their kingdoms if not their hearts? Perhaps he still felt the same, but power and pride superseded his love for her, which likely came as a betrayal, for it made her the fool and, worse, complicit in sabotage by the enemy. It is these circumstances that led to her becoming the lost sinner. There are two prevailing theories about the identity of this forgotten sinner. One, that the prisoner is the Queen of Ven. The other, Igel. Both assume that the person was imprisoned for attempting to create a first flame thanks to Shalquar's dialogue, but this misunderstands who the cat is referring to. In all of her commentary on bosses possessed by the Old Ones, Shalquar starts by musing on the person possessed or location where we encounter the boss. However, she invariably ends with a veiled reference to the true being behind the battle, using a double entendre for the current states of both souls. In the case of the lost sinner, the cat contemplates the role of the prison before relating about the stupid, forgotten sinner who tried creating a first flame occupying the equally forgotten prison. This is an obvious reference to the Witch of Izalith and doesn't necessarily reflect the crimes of the prisoner, thereby leaving an open question to the actual nature of the convict's sins. Assuming that the lost sinner is Igel, the crime is easy to imagine. He was a magic caster employed by the royal court of an enemy nation. There would be every reason for Ven to capture him after the collapse of the old Iron King's regime. Likewise, the height, physique, and beard beneath the mask lead many fans to conclude that the lost sinner is male. Indeed, the gender is never made explicit in any item's Japanese description. There is also the boss being accompanied by two pyromancers in NG+, each drop down a chute from adjacent cells. Igel himself practiced the flame arts Izalith invented, and the penal set provides a similar resistance ratio to that of a pyromancer's tattered cloth set. The slightly more resistance to the dark than magic can be attributed to exceptionally long confinement in a dimly lit cell. Some fans even point to the lost sinner's wooden handcuffs as an attempt to prevent the criminal from casting pyromancy. However, there is reason to be skeptical. Nothing precludes Igel from being killed by the disaster at Iron Keep or the infighting at Broom Tower. Moreover, the lost sinner's masculine features don't exclude the character from being a woman. The butch hollow cooks from DS1 are a testament to that. Underneath the clothing, the boss chest has been shaded like a bra, inexplicable on the developer's part, if not for female decency. As for the other two pyromancers, they can just as much be referencing the founder of pyromancy possessing the lost sinner as the sinner being a pyromancer. The same can be said for the penal set, which has similar resistance ratios to not only clothes worn by pyromancers, but also armor directly burned by fire or long immersed in fiery environments. We cannot exclude the effect that Izalith's soul has on the sinners being either. Finally, if they intended to prevent the sinner from conjuring flame from the palms of the hand, they would do more than just bind the wrists with wood. But we never once see the supposed pyromancer cast pyromancy. And so there is no reason for the boss to be strictly a pyromancer, man, or Igel. So, what can be said for certain about this forgotten sinner? For starters, the criminal was locked up in a large cell in the deepest, most isolated parts of the prison. Two adjoining towers on either side rise into the rock overhang beneath the rest of the facility, but we can only reach the main entrance by way of a single, narrow bridge across the ocean from the sinner's tower opposite them. Even getting to the sinner's rise requires we cross a similar bridge. Countless shackles hang from the barred ceiling, with over a half dozen more dragging across the floor from the walls until they converge to a single spot at the center, presumably having restrained the boss when confinement was still regulated. And aside from chutes to other cells, the jail itself is installed with extensive oil lighting on top of several wall torches. Red banners also hang from the back walls. This is an extremely luxurious cell for just a single prisoner, indicating that its occupant was a VIP of some sort. And yet, this luxury didn't extend to the VIP in question. Handcuffs, a straitjacket, and a heavy metal mask poking spikes into the face. The intention was to torture the sinner. This justifies the boss having a sword on hand. While the blade's English description claims its true nature to be unknown to even the boss, the actual text merely repeats the same statement made in the penal set descriptions. Both the prisoner's background and crimes are now long forgotten. In truth, she wields what is, by all appearances, a normal, unassuming sword. The blade we acquire harms us when swung and deals less damage to enemies as we increase our sin levels, but this is likely because it derives from the lost sinner's soul. A soul that was charged with self-punishment for sins and consequently creates a weapon maximizing self-harm for fellow sinners. Mayhap it had originally been a means to have a dignified way out, but this was a prisoner who felt duty-bound to suffer, and the faded bloodstains on the cell floor suggest much suffering. Another element to consider is the boss soul. The menu graphic
Oh
for
my
the soul
God.
of the Lost Sinner matches that of the Old Iron King, as well as other monarchs of similarly great
Thank
prominence
you.
and strength. Put simply, the Lost Sinner would need to have acquired the same amount of power as a heroic ruler before her crime,
Let's do
something
it
few
this time.
humans outside royalty have accomplished. She is, for sure, no amateur with a sword. The way the criminal
Oh.
nimbly leaps around with a practiced hand
What?
after wasting away all this time, she may well be a sword master. And if the physique is masculine, then she has definitely undergone a warrior's training. The only thing holding back her skill is her refusal to leave her cell and return to normal life. Therefore, the boss must be someone comparable to royalty, experienced in combat, and self-loathing over misconduct. The Queen of Ven checks all the boxes.
How the hell are you
The
not
Queen
hitting
had
this,
every
you
reason to feel
asshole?
culpable for the King of Alkin's continued aggression,
Do I
and there
have
may have
one?
been suspicions thrown around of her fraternizing or even conspiring with the enemy among the court.
I don't think
Assuming that her
witching
forbidden
works,
romance
unfortunately.
wasn't somehow exposed, and whether at her suggestion or public condemnation, she would be imprisoned while still
That's
given
exactly
some
sworn the
luxuries
bonfire
befitting her
video had
status.
a brawl.
Either
Yeah,
way,
that's why I mentioned
she would
the
cooperate
shading.
with her torturers. Behind the doors at the back of her cell is a chest containing an Elizabeth mushroom. Its healing powers make it useful for surviving harm, while its description casts doubt on the supposed beauty of the woman behind it, which mirrors the prisoner if she is the queen who once caught the eye of an enemy prince and now tortures herself, in more ways than one. Stored with Elizabeth's secret medicine is a fragrant branch of yore, combined with the red hue of her cell's banners, and the queen likely spent much of her time reminiscing about her old flame. Her romance was a time she dearly missed, a time when she was young and ignorant and enraptured in a love she believed would last forever. But no matter how much she pines for those memories, it won't change reality. She has been unable to let him go, and as a result felt fooled, betrayed, heartbroken, and deserving of all the world's hatred because of it. And because of that, she eternally punishes herself, all the while wishing she could return to those happier days. Maybe that is why writings in the stone plaster her cell, signaling its occupant to be very bored, lonely, or not the picture of mental health. This is, in all likelihood, what drew the soul of the Witch of Izalith to her. Upon entering the boss room, we see a tiny insect hanging from a hole in her mask. This bug is identical to the parasite found at the core of the Bed of Chaos in DS1, only smaller, and thus liable to still be the witch's true body. Considering the specific power of her lord soul and the flame it sparked, it is possible for the dregs of Izalith's soul to reconstruct her living vessel. And no longer host to that flame she created, the bug apparently roamed the land until finally coming upon the lost sinner. Both were once royalty who had made mistakes that were ultimately rejected by the world and left to suffer in isolation. The witch probably saw in her a kindred spirit, much like Gwyn and the old Iron King. And knowing heartbreak herself, the parasite did what they do and latched onto the prisoner. This possession explains why the lost sinner seems to survive the ages without food or drink, cursed by the strong will of a powerful soul similar to Icarus Earth. However, the differences between the two couldn't be clearer. Nothing has stopped the sinner from leaving her cell, yet we find her kneeling down with her head low quietly accepting her confinement even after everyone she has ever known is dead or a monster. Compared to the ambitious, which who turned her mistake into, at one point, a thriving civilization, and it is plain to see who arrogantly embraced her sin and who contritely accepted it. This is only emphasized by the underlying nature of the boss battle. Izalith crawls into the eye hole she hangs from before seemingly burrowing into the lost sinner's head, which is naturally painful to the queen. It is only afterward that the boss takes up her sword to attack us. In other words, it is the Witch of Izalith inducing the body to battle, defiantly challenging anyone who might dare slay the tortured soul she haunts, while the queen herself has merely wallowed in misery. Perhaps she wants the lost sinner to come to terms with her sadness on her own, but she definitely won't allow anyone to end her life before that, even the sinner herself. Of course, this may benefit the witch long term. The singed holes in the queen's palms raise suspicions when Izalith always wanted to hold flame in her hands. The design works confirms that it referenced the dark sign, but it is possible that the parasite carelessly channeled flame through the sinner's body during a prior attempt to control her. If so, the queen's stubborn will to remain might be the one thing preventing the witch from assuming greater command of an otherwise perfect vessel. It is self-interest all the way through. As for the rest of Ven, it may have carried on as normal. The fume sorcerers were among the many soldiers dispatched to take over the old Iron King's iron facilities after his supposed death. Specifically, they are assassins, their umbral daggers invoking the night as they fatally stab unknowing targets from behind. The fact that they are women dressed in blue wielding magic daggers in their other hand to conjure what appears to be a kind of lightning sorcery certainly fits Ven. Its gargoyles can do something similar with their spears, after all. The country would also undoubtedly be interested in retaking lost land, especially with more subtle infiltrators navigating the chaos that befell Alkin. Maybe Ven was initially unaffected by the imprisonment of its queen. But if there wasn't a clear successor, the country may have become swept up in the disarray after this subterfuge operation failed, lost without a uniting leader to guide them. In the end, both kingdoms fell apart by Drangliak's time, leaving only two belfries that continue to herald the love of a star-crossed pair to this day.
All right, that's it. That's the full thing, full 25 pages. Pretty good. There's a little bit more on the little typos than I was expecting. We're gonna have to get that one little paragraph section like fixed up and transitioned overall. Can't believe I completely forgot about that. So, whoa. Oh, really? Serious? I swear this game. But generally, I covered it. I didn't see anything like I was really missing or any like weird holes or whatever that I was like, oh, actually that didn't make as much sense as I thought in my head. Like, yeah, I think that just kind of lays it all out. I think that just lays it all out. Alright. There we go. Thank you. I want that soul. Souls! Give me more souls! Yum, 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 yum. I need more souls. That's a very good one. Yeah, I'm very happy. It's one of my bigger Dark Souls 2 analyses, right? It's very in depth. I mean, let's be honest. That's after, because remember, guys, I used to have like Huntsman's Copse and Iron and Earth and Harvest Valley, Earth and Peak. Like I used to have all that stuff, all part of it, and I removed it because not only were they getting bigger, the article's already big. So cutting it down like was great. And now after all these revisions and stuff, I've updated it so that way, yeah, it just covers. They're all long. They're all very long and in-depth. Which again is good, because there's a lot of world building to establish in Dark Souls 2 and a lot of characters and motivations and just basic plot elements to lay out, but I'm impressed. I am very much impressed. What's not impressive is the fact that I keep trying to hit the explosive barrels with that stupid guy's firebomb, and he won't cooperate. Like he threw it at it several times, and somehow it like hits the magic pixel in between them every time. I don't know how that happens. It boggles the mind. All right. Okay. So we didn't get too far in the game already, but it's mostly because I'm trying to take it casual and slow here, right? I'm not able to get any screenshots of anything from Iron Keep or Broom Tower, even if I wanted to. What we've got is what we're gonna have to deal with, unfortunately, unless I want to plug in my old PC and use the data that's still on the local data that's still on there. Trying to think. Hit the explosive barrels, Loki. Hit it with what? With my sword and blow myself up? Yeah, that's not going to be fun. Gonna hope my sparks will do the trick. Anyway, I'm gonna have to find that bonfire VN vid, by the way, Xavier, because I remember looking for it just the other day and I couldn't find it. So I was like, I guess I thought it up. But if you're remembering that too, then clearly that video exists. I just need to look for it. No, I don't have any. Darn. Stuck with one shard for the time being. Let's go over here and grab everyone's favorite bonfire to hide. Hey, it's Tower of Flame. Alright. Overall, though, very happy with it. Happy with how it moved together. Like I said, I think I'm going to sit over the weekend on some of this stuff. Just to really think it over. Like, I, for one, could see myself not liking the stuff with the Triclops snake and stuff. But overall, I think I've done my best to kind of have it all flow nicely. So, flow nice and smooth. Yes. Our favorite. This was the shield? That was the sword, okay. Everyone loves Aid. Well, I'm gonna like farming here, that's for sure. Farming here is gonna be a riot again. Oh no. Getting more intelligence soon. I forget how much intelligence you need, attunement you need in order to have proper iframes. Where's my, where's agility? I think agility needs to be at like 110 or something, right? I think 110 is the number you're supposed to aim for or something. Yeah, I don't remember. I do not remember. Yeah, honestly, it's not even worth it. I have a feeling you guys for the souls I get. At least not with this intelligence. If I had more DPS, sure. It'd be better though if I did Lost Giant first, though. I found it. Awesome, awesome, cool. Alright. Alright, so I've given it the one listen to. I don't think we need to do another. I think we got the idea and have all the important bits covered. So I'm happy with where we're at on that. So with all that in mind, I think we're gonna end things here. Again, thanks for those of you who sit in. I got a lot of kind words from you guys today. I don't know, are we having like a special, are we having a special sale for Abyssal Archive or something? Anyway, I hope you guys are doing all swell and everything. Love having you. Can you remove the text from the screen since it's finished at the moment? Sure, sure. I mean, we're ending the stream anyway, so why not, right? Why not? Me. There we go. Bonfire Vienna shows all the old ones and shows her. Okay, so that's where it is. So I have to look for one on the old ones. Period. Good, good. Ugh. All right. Yeah, the only thing I can think of is maybe wanting to expand on the stuff on Broom Tower. So, with that aside, I'm gonna try to think it over on the weekend. I'm very good with this update. If so, though, if like you know, I fixed up that paragraph and everything else, I feel like is all fine and dandy, at least for now. I think that's gonna be it. Alkin and Ven, the biggest article that I had to do left on the to-do list. It's there. I've been wanting to get that done for years now, honestly, especially with all the stuff we found the past year playing in you know, going through Broom Tower again. So put it in from software. Gotcha. Cool. Thank you so much, Xavier. Yeah, I'm glad you had fun. I am. Anyway, again, I want to thank everyone for the kind words and stuff. I know this is, you know, this is kind of like, you know, a casual kind of, you know, unconventional stream where it's just like mostly me playing around while listening to something, right? But I hope you guys were able to get some entertainment out of it and all that. And you know what? I feel like, you know, it's a very productive use of my time. So, well, we'll see. We'll see. This weekend, I'm probably going to do some like more HSR or something, but we'll see how that plays out. I'll think about it later.